to hear more. But, you know, for some reason, it just hasn't happened.
Right. What was she like in the studio?
She was very vibrant, very creative, very collaborative. It was only that one night where we were in the studio together. We ended up making another record together, a remix to So High from my first album, but we weren't in the studio together when she did her part on it. I did it with Wyclef. He produced it, and then he produced her session. So I wasn't in the studio with her the second time. And the only other time I was in the studio with her was auditioning for her band.
Right.
So the first time I was in the studio was playing piano on Everything Is Everything, and that was just impromptu. I was just hanging out, and during a break when they were writing,
It was like, you play.
my friend was like, Johnny, get over there and show her you can play. So I get over there, sit on the piano, and sing a couple songs. And she's like, why don't you play on the record we're working on now? And that was Everything Is Everything. And I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if they were going to use what I did on there. But a few months later, I got the call from the label, and they were like, we need to know how to spell your name for the credits, and how much do you want?
Millions. But last name is Millions. Did you know that song was going to do what it did?
No, I didn't know the album was, but I think there was a lot of expectation around her because the Fugees had already had a huge hit with the score. So the score had come out in '96, and Killing Me Softly was the biggest hit from that.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody's like, the girl that sings, we need to hear her do a whole album together, do a whole album by herself. And so everybody was wondering when she was going to go solo. And Wyclef had done the Carnival, and then Lauryn was about to put out Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. So there was a lot of expectation around it, but you never know how it's going to do. And then when it comes out, it's just like epic. It's classic. It's immediately world-changing when it comes out. And I was just proud to be a part of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you co-wrote with Janet Jackson, I Want You. How was it working with Janet in the studio?
We actually wrote that without her in the studio.
Okay.
It was me, Harold Lilly, Kanye. We wrote it and then submitted it to her, and she loved it.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's that like, John? What's that like? Like, we grew up with the Jacksons. We grew up with Michael. We grew all up, obviously Michael, then Janet. All of them. LaToya had her own thing. Jermaine did his own thing. But we mainly know Michael and Janet. And
I had a crush on Janet, man.
You had a crush on Penny?
If you ask me who my childhood crush was, it was Janet.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what's it like? So let me ask you a question. So like when you go, do artists reach out to you, or when you write and says, you know what, I think this would be great for her.
Well, there's a whole bevy of songwriters and producers who aren't on the mic, but they're behind a lot of the music that you love. So a lot of artists work with songwriters. They get submissions from songwriters. Sometimes they collaborate with you in the room, but sometimes they just take submissions, and their A&R or their producer is helping them listen to those songs and decide whether or not it's going to work for them. So there's a lot of people who are professionally just cranking out songs and submitting them to artists. Sometimes artists will do a camp. So they'll say, I'm going to bring all the songwriters and producers I like to work with, that I have a track record with, or that I love their work. I'm going to bring them all to Jamaica or the Bahamas or whatever, and we're going to camp out for a week or two and just write with the goal of producing enough songs that will go on my next album. So one way or another, artists are trying to get material, and a lot of times it's professional songwriters, people you may not have heard of, but that are behind the scenes involved in a lot of making of these songs.
Is it hard to write like that when you go for a specific reason? Like you get invited to this place and you mentioned this camp, so we're going for a week or two, or is it easier just for it to come natural?
Well, I don't do that, so you'd have to ask them, but I imagine sometimes it's easier to write when you have a specific goal in mind.
Okay.
So when you're in a camp, you know the artist you're writing for. The artist is usually there. They're providing kind of creative direction and spiritual guidance, of where their head is and what they want to say on their album. And so I think it's easier for me to write when I have an assignment than when it's just open-ended. And so I'd rather have some sense of I know who I'm writing for, I have some direction, rather than just write.
Right. Didn't you write a song with Mike?
We wrote a song, me and will.i.am wrote a song for Mike
Right.
that never came out, yeah.
Right.
So, you know, that was back in those days when I was hustling, just trying to get on records. And, you know, I work with different producers and they're like, yeah, we're trying to get on Mike's new album or
Right.
Janet's new album or Jay's new album and work with me on this. And sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. But that's the life of a songwriter. Like, if that's your job, a lot of the songs you make will not come out. A lot of the ideas you generate may never see the light of day.
But when you're writing, you just hope you can get one or two.
Yeah.
You get one or two, that's your end.
Yeah.
And then people are like, well, I want to go to that guy that wrote this, or I want to go to the woman that wrote
exactly.
that.
And even with myself, I will often write a bunch of songs for myself or with other people for myself that don't make my album. So I got a bunch, like lots and like dozens and dozens of songs that may never be heard by anybody other than the people that made it.
What about, is that something that you'd be willing to like, okay, it didn't make my album, I don't think it's right for me, but it might be right for you?
Sometimes, but often I feel like if it's written for a male singer and it didn't make my album, there's not a great chance that it's the best of the best. And oftentimes I don't feel like it's marketable to other artists. Sometimes it's just not the right feel for me and maybe it would be the right feel for another artist. But a lot of times I'm just like, well, if I don't want it, then why should they?
Someone?
Yeah, why should they want it?
But you was working with Nipsey Hussle, you won a Grammy for Hire with DJ Khaled.
Yeah.
So what was it like working? So let me ask you a question. Your artist, when you go into the studio, and whomever it is, it doesn't have to be anybody in particular. So what's John Legend's goal when he goes into the studio with an artist?
I just want to make the record amazing. So I want to make it something that I'm proud of, that will make history. I want my legacy to be my records.
Right.
And so every time I go in there, I'm going in with that goal of making something special, life-changing, legacy building. And with Khaled, people always ask me, what does Khaled actually do? Does he do this? But part of what he does that's so important is he brings all these different artists together. He has a great ear, and he is able to bring the right beat with the right artist, with the right rapper, with the right singer, put it all together and make a record. And that's not a simple thing to do, because if everybody could do it, they would be doing it.
Correct.
But he's doing it.
Right.
So he is great at connecting people, bringing things together, hearing a beat and be like, I can hear Nipsey on this one. I can hear Hove on this one. I can hear Drake on this one. Bringing those people together, having the relationships with them and bringing them together to make the record happen, that's not an easy thing to do. Right. And that's what Khaled does. And so he's brought me in on a bunch of records. And it's funny, he won his first Grammy with that record. Wow. So this record we made together, Higher, with Nipsey, we won the Grammy after Nipsey passed. And what's wild about it for me and Khaled is the first song we did together was a song called Grammy Family. And we made a song called Grammy Family long before he ever had a Grammy. Right. And then many years later, I helped him win his first Grammy.
Want to join Club Shay Shay? Become an official member by hitting that subscribe button, where you never know who's going to be joining us for drinks and conversation. Don't be late to the party, because you know we like to do something before two something.